IVF Real Talk.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm Yael. Welcome back, guys. Today we're joined by fertility nurse Fran from Monday Fertility, all the way in Canada. Welcome.
Hey, guys. So good to be with you today.
So good to have you. How's the weather in Canada? I need to know.
You know what? Today wasn't so bad. It's starting to get warmer, but it's very rainy at this time of year. So,
oh, wow.
But it's much colder than you.
Yeah, it would be.
It's still probably cold.
For us Aussies, we're like freezing today.
Yeah, today's a cold day. We're hit like one of our lowest days. Today for us, it's going to be 20 degrees max, right?
Yeah, I walked to get a coffee this morning at 7 a.m. It was probably about 15 degrees.
Yep.
And I didn't have a jacket on because it looked sunny, it looked nice outside, but it was so cold. I was struggling.
I messaged Lou, do I need to wear a jumper? She's like, yes, I've got the heater on.
Yep.
Wear a jumper. It's freezing. And I was like, oh, okay.
But before we start, Fran, we'll hand it over to you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the fertility space.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm Fran, otherwise known as Francesca. That's how I was named when I was born.
I love that name.
Me too.
I'm a perinatal certified registered nurse from the other side of the world in Toronto, Canada. My career has really consisted of working with women and families along the entire reproductive continuum. So I spent years in the traditional fertility clinic space. I've taught thousands of couples pre and postnatal education, delivered babies, and helped families cope with devastating pregnancy loss. And now I have the privilege of working with OTO and Monday Fertility in a really different kind of fertility space as we help couples navigate their stress physiology. Now, I really didn't have this on my bingo card for 2026, but it's awesome to be here and really share some under-discussed and often dismissed evidence on how stress impacts our fertility, but more importantly, what we can actually do about it. Now, I think it's important for me to acknowledge that I'm not a physician. I'm not here to diagnose or give medical advice, rather just shed some light on a traditionally ignored area and share some highly effective but perhaps underutilized interventions that can increase our pregnancy potential. I think I also want to make clear that I'm not here to discredit or talk poorly about IVF or the IVF clinics around the world. I think that IVF is a miraculous discovery and, quite frankly, a miracle tool that allows more couples and individuals to make families and have children. IVF doctors are amazing, excellent at facilitating IVF cycles. I think sometimes, maybe oftentimes that doesn't line up with the patient experience, right? The model is clinical efficiency rather than the unique patient journey and the unique patient landscape, right? So I think ultimately we will always need really good IVF doctors, and they do exist. I've had the privilege of working with some of the best. But truly, we need to solve a problem. And the problem is why people aren't able to get pregnant when their workups tell us that they shouldn't have a problem, right? Are we doing everything we can to help them optimize their bodies so that they don't have to go through this really painful process? Are we doing everything in our control to prevent multiple unnecessary cycles, right? We were designed to have children, right, in a certain way. And it's becoming increasingly more common that a large percentage of people aren't able to, right? The rates of infertility are rising. And part of my desire is to help couples feel more in controlled and empowered in a system that has traditionally taken a lot of their autonomy or power over outcomes away. If you're listening today and you're in the throes of trying to conceive and things haven't been how you pictured or how you hoped, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Infertility is not fair. I see you, and I think you are an absolute superhuman.
I feel emotional.
Me too.
I feel emotional. I feel
like we should have spoke to you when we were on our journey.
Yeah. You just get it. And I think you're so right what you said. I just so much resonated with wanting to be in control. You do. You want that control. And I feel like when you do go to a doctor, even though they're great, it's out of your control completely.
Oh, you're handing over everything to them.
Everything is out of your control, and it's so scary.
And that's all we want when we're on the journey. We just want to be able to map it out, be in control of like making changes, fixing the problem, and we literally hand over everything to them. Our biggest hopes and dreams go to them, like make us have our babies. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
Before we get into the questions, we're really interested to learn more about OTO and how it actually works, and a bit more about Monday Fertility.
Yeah. So OTO Fertility is a clinical grade biometric device that measures how your brain, nervous system, and heart are regulating stress and recovery. It provides predictive insight and personalized guidance based on biomarkers for every path to parenthood. Whether you're actively pursuing IVF, trying to optimize before treatment, or trying to conceive naturally. Now, OTO Fertility is built on 40 plus years of physiological research. OTO gives patients a medical grade diagnostic tool in the comfort of their own home, and it provides personalized insights into how the nervous system, stress levels, and core health systems are affecting fertility. Now, OTO's technology is built on a well-established but historically unmeasured connection, right? We know that chronic physiological stress disrupts the hormonal balance required for ovulation and implantation, and ultimately achieving a pregnancy. We know that chronic activation of the HPA axis, and we'll talk about that more later. We know that when the HPA axis is, chronically activated, that it suppresses hormone signaling from the brain to the ovaries. And this directly interferes with our reproductive health. Until OTO, physiological stress has really remained largely unmeasured in clinical traditional fertility care. The actual OTO device itself is wildly cool. It uses medical grade EEG and ECG technology to measure the impact of stress on the body. And we have an AI powered app that provides daily action steps to strengthen the metrics within the body that are hindering the individual's ability to have a baby. We do this by engaging in a daily 4-minute assessment that captures 50 different biological signals and then calculates your fertility index. And this shows how ready your body is for conception, but also where we can optimize your physiology to shorten your time to pregnancy and perhaps even, achieve a healthier, more low risk pregnancy. The OTO biosensor provides a window into the central nervous system, cardiac system, HRV, and metabolic pathways, all of which can have suboptimal stress biology and can hinder your baseline fertility potential. We're truly a first of its kind piece of technology that's objectively measuring the impact of stress on the body, decoding or demystifying it, if you will, and providing evidence-based steps to optimize your fertility journey, whether it's through natural conception or through ART. Now, as a traditionally and medically trained fertility nurse, anecdotally, I can tell you without a doubt that stress impacts fertility, and it's a vicious cycle. We've all heard of the patients that have done multiple failed IVF cycles, and then they finally, put away the dream of having a baby and they conceive naturally. Or the couple who waits 4, 5, 6 years to book an IVF cycle. They book it and they get pregnant the next month. They never have another day one. The couple that gets the dog, the couple that goes on the vacation and they finally have that positive beta, right? So anecdotally, I've always known that stress matters and stress does impact fertility. But it's really just now that we've treated it like it has value in the clinical pathway. OTO provides us a way to objectively measure and accurately assess stress biology and then optimize it. And really, isn't that what fertility is all about, right? Optimizing as many things as we can. But I think the origin story of OTO is really interesting and quite unique. And so, really, we've been using this technology, as I mentioned, for the last 40 years to measure the impact of stress on physiology and readiness, but we've done it in different contexts. The underlying physiological measurement technology was actually first developed in the 1980s, and it was built to assess stress regulation and the impact of stress on space travel. So we first used the technology with NASA, and we measured the impact of stress on an astronaut's body as they went to space and back. And then in the late 1990s, we brought the science out of aerospace medicine and into elite athletic performance. The goal was really a non-invasive, fast, objective readiness assessment, the kind that, previously would require blood draws, muscle biopsies, or hospital grade equipment used by specialists. So when we moved into the sphere of professional athletics, these elite athletes and Olympians would actually do an assessment upon arrival at the training facility. And the biometric data would be used to guide the coach on how to optimally train them that day. And it was based on their physiology, right? We wanted to give the coach the information on how to elicit the best performance out of the athlete, while also giving insight on how to decrease the risk of injury, which matters when you pay these athletes the kind of money that you pay them, right? We don't want them to get hurt. And we also want their performance to be optimized. Of particular interest to this audience, the national rugby team in Australia used our technology. So OTO has, So OTO has had athletes and teams from virtually every professional sports league, and multiple Olympic federations as well have used our technology. Yeah, so cool. So in around 2022, we started exploring applications of this technology and its ability to impact pregnancy outcomes. We hypothesized that it mattered, our stress physiology. But in 2022, after the pandemic, we actually conducted a prospective cohort study, and we learned that there are biomarkers relating to our stress physiology that can actually impact IVF outcome better than any traditional marker we use today. So if you go see your fertility doctor for a consult, they're going to use a combination of your age, your AMH, your BMI, likely whether or not your embryos are genetically normal. And they'll give you a prediction of your ability to succeed in achieving a pregnancy. Now, not only was our biosensor able to give predictive insight with clinical grade biometrics and AI, but we could also apply the billions of data points that we have already on human physiology to build an AI-powered application that gives daily activity recommendations to decrease stress, increase resilience, and ultimately strengthen the metrics that we know through our study correlate the most with pregnancy outcome and pregnancy potential. So, as an organization, we've really been on this journey from orbit and now to ovulation. And it's really cool that I get to be a part of it. So I'm the lead nurse at Monday Fertility, which is the virtual clinic partner of OTO. Now, OTO already partners with numerous IVF clinics across the world, but we really wanted to create an environment where no matter where you were on your TTC journey, that you could have access to this type of technology and insight to hopefully shorten your time to pregnancy, using objective data, no more guesswork. We really wanted to be able, through Monday Fertility, to get this technology in the hands of couples across the globe. And I have the privilege of leading the charge with that from a nursing perspective. So, we serve patients along the entire continuum of their fertility journey. And the tech has application in so many other areas of health, in autoimmune, in longevity, et cetera. But of particular interest to the, TTC community, women who find the most use for our tool would be women who have had multiple failed IVF cycles already, women who are trying to optimize their chance of success, unexplained infertility. That's not a thing, right? Unexplained is not a thing. Women with unexplained infertility find massive benefit from using our tool in our application, but also women with PCOS, endometriosis, adeno, autoimmune conditions, all of these inflammatory conditions that really create a stress burden on the body. When we can measure it and then give a woman concrete action steps to lessen that burden, we see the time to pregnancy shortened. So yeah, I count myself so blessed that I get to partner with couples, at different points of their journey and, give a little bit of control and hope back in a, typically very hopeless journey.
Yeah, definitely. This is a whole lot better than tracking my temperature,
yes,
which I done when I was TTC. So it's pretty impressive. And there's not much. Well, I don't think there's anything else in the market like it. I've never heard.
I didn't have a very long TTC experience because I was older, but my IVF journey was long. But yeah, so I didn't do the temperature stuff that you did or any of that, but there's not anything like this on the market.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's amazing for just longevity, full stop. Like I want one walking around with an ECG.
Yeah, spoiler alert, but when we optimize our health, we optimize our pregnancy rates and our fertility too, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Makes such sense.
It's funny that you say that because I had a 6-week long holiday in Europe just before my transfer at work. So I do think that had a little something to do with it. The sun, the relaxing.
Yeah, that just the stopping, and having some, you time and not running the marathon.
There's so much science behind what you're saying.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Today, Fran is going to help us unpack what stress actually means for our bodies when trying to conceive. So should we jump into the questions?
Yeah, let's go. Do you see women whose bodies are showing signs of stress even though they're in that, I feel like I'm coping and I'm doing everything okay and day to day I'm fine?
I think to answer that question, we need to clear up the misconception that stress is just how we feel. I want you to think about stress as any threat to the stability of your body, anything that challenges its balance or what we call homeostasis. Now, how we feel definitely contributes to our psychological stress, and that's real. Right? But stress is so much more than just how we feel. There's internal processes happening regularly that may be supporting or disrupting your homeostasis or your balance. And we call these physiological stressors. Examples of these could be illness, inflammation, overexercising, undereating, poor sleep hygiene, insulin resistance. The majority of things we can't really see or subjectively and accurately measure, right? We can't see it with the naked eye. So when we think about stress, we need to think about the total sum of the stress load on somebody's body, what they feel, the psychological, and also the physiological challenges or burden or load that we can't see. At OTO, we call that the stress index. Another way to think of the types of stress would be that there's a subjective experience of psychological stress, but then there's an objective amount of physiological internal stress that we can measure too. So if we could measure stress with just how we feel, we wouldn't need a tool like this, right? And we would have kind of answered the stress question. Now, I see patients all the time that have relatively low baselines of psychological stress, meaning they feel good, they're in control, they've really compartmentalized, they're in control of that mental turmoil that infertility brings. But their objective data tells a different story. And when physiological stress is increased, with resilience to that stress being decreased, this can impact our ability to have a baby. So sometimes there's hints that stress is starting to hijack our fertility, but they can be very subtle. So things like irregular or absent cycles, an abnormally long follicular phase, a really short luteal phase. But sometimes by the time we realize there's an issue, we've already spent countless months trying without success that we can't get back, right? So absolutely, a woman can feel like she's in control, but really her body's in turmoil on the inside.
I think for me, just thinking back on my journey, I think hints of that for me was insomnia. Because I'm a great sleeper. Yeah. What about you?
I had that too. And I was, like you said, I was already so thick in it with the immune protocol and I was on steroids. And so I was doing things thinking I was in control and trying to help the situation. But I was probably slowly spiraling through stress with no sleep and changing diet. You and I both did it. We did the gluten-free, dairy-free, you did sugar-free. All of that impacts.
I had a lot of weight loss with that as well, just because I was cutting out so much and probably the stress as well.
Yeah, I was the opposite. I felt like I was just gaining and gaining and gaining with the emotional.
Because you're on steroids.
Yes. The steroids and the back-to-back cycles and
Yeah, it's full on. The next question, what does fertility readiness actually mean beyond ovulation timing?
Yeah, well, first off, there's some non-negotiables when it comes to fertility, right? We need eggs, we need sperm, we need a uterus, and at least one open tube in the scenario of natural fertility. Of course, we can bypass tubes if we add IVF, but we still need eggs, sperm, and a uterine cavity. So if you have suspicion to think you're missing one of those non-negotiables, or big rocks, as I like to call them, you should pursue a fertility workup ASAP if you want to have a family. But, to answer your question, if we go back to the definition of stress, it's any threat to the stability of a system, right? So our body was made with one primary function, and that is survival. So the function of stress is really to mobilize resources to escape or evade a threat, right? If I see a bear, I need to run away from that bear. The HPA, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is the internal mechanism that does this. So the brain, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland will receive information and then send out a signal. In the instance of stress, this will drive the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline. And this drives our stress response. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for this, and it will put you in fight or flight mode. I actually call this survival mode. That's my term for it. Okay. So fight or flight is survival mode, right?
For sure.
And now when our body's in survival mode or a chronically elevated sympathetic nervous system state, the body starts to divert resources to survival functions and away from elective functions like reproduction. So for example, if I see the bear, my sympathetic nervous system is activated and sends and diverts resources in my body to battle. Right? The stress hormones will increase my heart rate, increase my breathing, my circulating glucose increases, my insulin increases so that I can run away from the bear, right? The problem is we live in an inherently stressful world, right? The problem is though, we aren't face to face with being eaten by a bear. Okay. But we can all agree that there's numerous stressors that we face every day. Unfortunately, though, our body has a really hard time discriminating against types of stressors. So the acute stressors can actually become a chronic or long-term activation of their stress response. Now, when we're in a chronic level of stress activation, as I said before, our body is going to prioritize essential functions, and it's going to divert resources away from more elective functions like having a baby. Right? So chronic stress not only allows for less resources to be allocated to reproduction, but it also acts like a vicious cycle, interfering with the communication pathway of the HPO axis, hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And this is responsible for the cascade of reproductive hormones that we need to have a menstrual cycle and achieve a pregnancy. So to sum that up, fertility readiness is building an adaptive capacity or a resilience to the stressors of everyday life so that we aren't in this chronic state of survival mode. And so that our body feels the permission and the safety to support that cascade of reproductive hormones that's required not just for getting pregnant, but staying pregnant. We can show signs of ovulating, but not cycling our hormones optimally. And this really matters.
This is off the record, but I feel like I need your device all the time now. I feel like our life is just so stressful.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And you know what?
I feel like I'm always in flight mode.
I've done a lot of the ovulation tracking in my cycle, but I wanted to know more detail. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it was great to know I was about to ovulate and I was peaking with my ovulation, but I wanted to know other factors. I wanted to know how my heart rate was, what's with stress, how much sleep I actually got.
It's more information.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, I feel like you'll agree with me, Lucy. I feel like this was us the whole journey. So why do so many women feel like they're doing everything but still feel so lost?
I think we could probably sit down and do a whole episode on this topic. So I'm going to do my best to articulate my thoughts concisely here. The first thing I want to say is that I think we have way overcomplicated things. I think we take every supplement. We try protocol after protocol. We have our partner take every supplement. We treat the microbiome. We put ourselves into menopause. And yet we're skipping the basics. Now, a lot of women, especially in my career, in my practice, and I think this is the norm in a lot of spheres, a lot of women are not doing the basic things that create a healthy body and mind. We prioritize the fertility pieces, but we actually neglect the healthy human pieces. And this isn't to shame anyone, because this is the world we live in. And why would you prioritize these lifestyle factors when the majority of fertility physicians say that they don't matter, right? Obviously, they talk about BMI, smoking, alcohol, marijuana, but that's kind of where the lifestyle conversation starts. Now, we've talked about the stressful world that we live in, but even more so, I think we live in a really inflammatory, constant stress world. So when we don't have the strong foundation that we need, and we don't have the foundation in place, of course, the other strategies aren't always successful, right? You can't out-supplement an inflammatory diet. You can't decrease inflammation if you refuse to quit smoking, right? We'll talk about the simple building blocks later on, but I think really we need to create a healthy base rather than slapping expensive Band-Aids on, right? And I'll never forget what one of my mentors once told me. And she said, you can put perfume on a pig, but you still have the pig. And so, yeah, right?
Never heard that one before. That's good. I'm stealing that one.
Actually, she's Australian too, so I'm surprised.
Oh,
but,
cool.
while it's important to define, I really do think it's important to define doing everything. But to answer your question, I told you we could do a whole episode on this. Why do so many women feel like they're doing everything but still feel lost? I think this is threefold. So first, when we're in the IVF world, we have very few touch points with our care team. We have to cover the big things, and then there's very little time left to talk about lifestyle optimization. Not to mention, we very rarely test beyond the basic fertility workup, or we need to have multiple failed cycles to dig deeper, right? To give us objective data about other physiological markers that we might need to address to ultimately get that baby in our arms. And, that's what I really love about OTO is that it's not a one-time assessment. We're getting daily insight into exactly what's happening on a physiological level, and then clear, concrete, personalized activity plans to increase the factors that are making it harder for us to have a baby. So the third reason is I think in this world of social media, ChatGPT, Dr. Gemini, and access to all of this information, which is, I know the irony, right? I'm here on a podcast that will be on social media, but it can be really daunting to sift through the data and understand what's true and has the highest return on our effort, right? So, the influencer with the biggest following must be the most credible, right? That's kind of the world that we live in. And I think we need to do a better job about clearly articulating what's within our control and then providing guidance on those big rocks that I talked about before, right? We need to do a better job at assessing objectively and then taking the guesswork out of how to move forward. So, when we think about pregnancy, it really is an odds game at the end of the day, right? The more things we optimize, the better our overall chances of achieving a pregnancy and having a baby. The problem is, say there's 100 rocks that are in our control. The average patient is probably doing 90 of the small ones, but they're missing a few key big ones. And the big ones are the ones that we need to get in place first, right? You can't escape a suboptimal physiology. It's truly our foundation. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that soon. And I just want to say too, this isn't to shame anyone. Our world is causing our bad physiology. right? So we need to understand we're all in it together, and we need to understand those big rocks, those foundational things that we need to put in place, not just to get pregnant, but to live a long time and care for our children, right? And to have quality of life.
Just a follow-up question on that. How does the nervous system impact cycle health or ovulation over time?
Earlier, we talked about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and how this is really a communication pathway between the brain and the body to regulate our stress response. Now, there's two branches of our autonomic or our involuntary nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system, and we've talked about that already, right? It's our fight or flight survival response. I want you to think of it like a gas pedal. Now, oppositely, the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest, digest, calm, safe, kind of humming along on autopilot nervous system. I want you to think of the parasympathetic like a brake pedal. Now, ideally, when we talk about a regulated or balanced nervous system, we have brief sympathetic activation in response to acute stressors, and then we come back down quickly to baseline by using our parasympathetic nervous system. So they kind of work in tandem. I like to say they work in tandem to stay at the speed limit, right? We don't want to be in overtake mode all the time. Now, the combination of how they work in the body create a metric called heart rate variability, commonly known as HRV, and that's a widely understood concept when we talk about stress and its impact on the body. So back to the HPA axis. So when the HPA axis is turned on and there's sympathetic nervous system activation, this can actually interfere with the communication in our HPO axis. And remember, we talked about this being responsible for our reproductive health, right? The HPO axis is how our brain communicates through signals to our ovaries and vice versa, how our ovaries communicate back. Now, stress hormones that are activated by that sympathetic nervous system, stress hormones like cortisol can interfere with how the brain and ovaries communicate with each other. We also know that when we're in survival mode, our body prioritizes essential functions, not elective functions like getting pregnant. Now, I want to mention here, like cortisol is not the enemy. Okay. In fact, it's our survival mechanism. Cortisol is the reason we can wake up and start our day in the morning, right? Cortisol levels are naturally at their highest in the morning. But when cortisol becomes a problem is when we fail to clear or offload it from our bodies after that threat has passed. So with high stress resilience or high HRV, we have an efficient clearing or offloading system of cortisol and a faster return back to baseline. And so that means we're using our brake pedal really effectively to get back down to the speed limit. Now, there's studies that show that persistently elevated cortisol can actually create diagnostics that look normal, but actually not. So, with persistently elevated cortisol, you can have a uterine lining that looks perfect, but it's actually unreceptive, right? It's thick enough, it's trilaminar, but it's not receptive. We can have an immune intolerance in the uterus. We can have vasoconstriction to the uterus so that blood flow is sent to essential body functions and away from elective functions in the uterus. And we can also have a shorter implantation window. So in severe scenarios of undealt with stress or chronically elevated levels of stress, that brain ovary connection can turn off completely. And this is called hypothalamic amenorrhea. But usually what happens is a less than optimized hormonal cascade. So I like to think of ovulation almost like a crescendo of that, hormonal cascade. And when we have persistent levels of cortisol circulating in our body and a stress response that's always on, we still may have a small LH surge, right? So you might pee on the stick and see a surge, but actually an egg doesn't leave because it hasn't crescendoed. It hasn't been an optimal cascade of hormones, right? So I think especially for women already at the disadvantage of having infertility, we want everything in our control to be optimized. Now, I think Another thing I need to do justice talking about is how inflammation and insulin resistance really work in tandem to oppose the optimal function of the HPO axis and really our overall fertility potential. So earlier I mentioned that inflammation and insulin resistance are inherently stressful to the body, and that's true. Both of these actually impact egg quality. They can impact ovarian reserve. They impact the uterine environment, and really they create havoc inside our bodies. So when we think about inflammation, which is stress, it's a type of physiological stress. I like to think of inflammation like a slow burning fire in our bodies. And cortisol is a pro-inflammatory hormone, right? If you cut yourself, there's a cortisol response and there's an inflammatory process that helps you heal. But in these like chronic elevated levels of stress, we're actually like stoking the fire of inflammation, right? So we already have like an inflammatory burden on the inside, and now we have cortisol just stoking the fire. I also like to think of inflammation like bad cell service. So it can actually create a disruption. Really, when we think about all the ways that chronic stress can impact fertility, I think it's important to remember that this doesn't happen because of just one thing. It can happen in multiple different pathways.
Yeah. I think when I was on my journey, I don't know about you, if you were the same, Yael, but I would get all of these heart palpitations all of the time. And I don't get it anymore, only if I have too many energy drinks, which I've now cut out. But, and I just started to, because it was so many years, that was the norm for me. I didn't even, at the end, I just thought, this is my body. This is how it is. But now I compare to how I am now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, I must have been in a really high state of stress with the no sleep.
Yeah.
Probably not eating enough because I cut so many food groups out. And
always feel like you're racing.
And I wasn't having a lot of caffeine.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I cut
I was
caffeine.
having quarter a shot of coffee. That was my coffee order, quarter shot.
And I cut it for 3 years, but still felt exactly what you're saying. Still felt that.
That breaks my heart. Breaks my heart that we've normalized these things. It also shows like the strength of infertility warriors, right? To just be okay with all of those awful side effects, whether they are from stimulation medication, down-regulating medication, or just the stress of the journey itself. Like, man, my heart goes out to my patients. I said it before, I'll say it again. You guys are the superhumans. We don't praise you enough.
I've got goosebumps. You know when I would feel anxiety the most? Coming off all of the hormones that drop the next day?
Yeah.
Were you the same? My anxiety would spike up extremely high. I think the hormone drop would just affect my body so much.
Yeah, the hormone drops would. You'd just be up. I just felt like it was up, down, like it was just constant.
That's why they say it's a roller coaster.
And that's exactly
right. Think about that as, threat to the stability or balance of your system, right? You normalize that elevated hormonal state, and then all of a sudden your body almost panics, right? Because it has to find balance again. So I'm not surprised at all that was your experience. I hear it all the time. It shouldn't be this way, but it is this way. And so, giving women and couples the tools to kind of build resiliency to the stress that we know is coming is so important.
And people that start this journey are so closed off to, talking about it at the very beginning that you can't be prepared then. So if they could have these tools and they could know, like we were both very silent about it and, it took us a long time to get to a point of being open. So to have that I think would be so good because, you really can't prepare for the journey you're about to go.
And I think even if you hear what's coming, it's really hard to internalize it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't land the system that we have. You don't have that healthcare expert or that support as much as you need it to remind you that, hey, this is normal. these are strategies to lessen these side effects. These are side effects that we just have to grin and bear, right? Knowing what's in our control and what's not, and having somebody walk alongside the journey with you. That's one thing I've just found such a privilege being at Monday Fertility, is really that I have so much more time one-on-one with patients than I ever did in the traditional fertility space. And so my clinic visits, they're all different. They're all unique. It's what that woman needs that day. Sometimes we talk about her data, sometimes we don't. And that's okay, because I think the road of infertility is such a lonely journey. And you can read blogs and listen to podcasts and, be so prepared and still just feel so lonely and lost and isolated. So it's such a gift for me to be able to kind of walk alongside couples as they go through that. I still don't know how I got so lucky, because I think I'm probably blessed more than everyone else, but it really is such a gift. I'm going off topic. Sorry, guys.
No, you're right.
That's sweet.
Yeah, that's really sweet. Yeah, and they're lucky to have you in their corner. It's so important to have a good support on the journey. So, yeah, we all need a Fran.
Yes.
In light of that, for the listeners that are listening now and about to embark on the 2-week wait, what actually helps from a body perspective?
I think it's important to remember that we want our bodies to feel safe and in control. And our nervous system should be regulated, or at the very least, we should be implementing the right strategies to encourage our parasympathetic nervous system to activate that brake pedal, right? We want rest, digest, not fight or flight. Now, it's interesting, but the 2-week wait happens during the luteal phase. And this is a progesterone dominant phase. I'm not sure how much the audience here knows, but our stress resilience and our HRV, they're actually lower when we're in our luteal phase, when progesterone is the dominant hormone. And the reason for this is because our body is sending resources to the uterus to prepare for a pregnancy, right? So think about progesterone as the progestation hormone, right? Your body is starting to act pregnant on a physiological level. So in my opinion, the worst thing you can do during the 2-week wait is drastically change your routine, right? If you're using OTO, the beauty is that you'll get an activity recommendation that your body's signals are indicating that they can handle and that they need, right? But if you're flying blind, like the majority of patients do these days, my recommendation is to keep doing what you've been doing. But understand that your recovery might be a little bit slower because the body's sending resources to gestate a fetus, right? I think it's also important to act pregnant until proven otherwise.
Love
Pupo. Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite part.
Yeah. That's my advice to anyone at any point on their fertility journey. We need to act pregnant now to get pregnant later. Okay. So I've always been so perplexed that we wait for that positive beta or the 2 solid lines to start making those healthy pregnancy changes. But ultimately, during the 2-week wait, I want you to listen to your body and give it the TLC that it's asking for, right? You might need to stick with more mild movement, and that's okay. But remember, stress is any threat to your body's stability. So stay the course and don't give your body a reason to panic and go into fight or flight mode, right? Your body and your nervous system crave stability. So do what's in your control during that 2-week wait to give it that.
That's great advice. I haven't heard that before ever.
No.
But I really like that. Do the same routine.
Yeah. But it also lines up with my successful 2-week wait.
Yes.
It was the first. I had gone through 7 transfers. This was my 7th transfer. I had 6 that failed. But on the 7th, I decided to take some time off work. It was COVID, so I was stuck at home. I did small walks. I didn't do anything. I really just chilled. I did adult colouring in. That was
the most chill 2-week wait you had.
Yeah, it was. I spent all the rest of them frazzled and anxious, but this one I decided, no, I'm just going to enjoy the bubble. I'm going to stay as pregnant as I was on transfer day, the whole way as far as I can, and just chilled. And interestingly,
I heard some advice the other day on a podcast, one of the big podcasts, that said, if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, pick up another activity. And I was like, no, that advice, I feel like, just no.
That's horrible advice.
Don't you think? Don't you think? I was trying to understand it. I really wanted to understand it, but I'm like, no, I'm not picking up another hobby.
I'm dropping everything.
If I'm feeling overwhelmed this week, how am I going to pick up something else? I need to put something down.
Yes, that's right. That makes sense.
The next question, what's the difference between guessing stress versus
so
measuring it?
Considering we know the impact that chronic stress can have on our physiology and our reproductive health, I think the fact that we don't measure it in a traditional fertility workup is crazy. We're leaving so much on the table when we don't have objective data to make decisions from. And I think patients really have to beg to have stress and inflammatory markers tested, right? We change that at OTO by using a non-invasive monitoring approach. But, I'll go back to, something I've mentioned so many times today. And stress isn't just what we feel, right? It's the sum of the strain on the system or those threats to our homeostasis or our balance. So when we measure stress objectively, first off, I think it validates what we know is real, right? Infertility is stressful, not just on our minds, but also on our bodies. But when we have measurable data like we get using the OTO biosensor, we can then take strategic steps forward that don't just help us feel better in our minds, but that also dampens the impact of stress on our bodies. We can follow the prescribed daily activity plans that directly decrease our stress load, but also increase our overall resilience or adaptive capacity to it. So at OTO and in my role as a fertility support nurse at Monday Fertility, we aren't in the business of trying to get rid of the stress in your life. Of course, if there's things that we can get rid of, we want to kind of counsel you to make those tender changes, because I think sometimes it's really hard to say no to things or to let go. So we want to bring awareness on those really high stress days of what are some things that are in my control that I can let go of today? But we know the stress of infertility is real, and we also recognize the stressful, inflammatory world that we live in. But the difference is that we, measure it objectively and provide evidence-based action plans to build your resilience to it. So I like to think of stress resilience, which is a key metric in our reproductive health, as how well our body manages or offloads the stress that we encounter on a daily basis. Because, remember, cortisol is not the enemy, but it's the prolonged exposure that can sabotage our fertility. And let's face it, our overall health. Hello. But how can we be better prepared when the stress of life inevitably hits? So, as we build the adaptive capacity or the resilience, I like to think of it almost like going from an immature sapling to a mature tree. So we know that the storms of life are coming, right? But frankly, that immature sapling does not have a chance. But that deeply rooted, anchored, mature tree, it really takes a strike of lightning to knock it down. And so as we build our resilience, our body doesn't have to work so hard to maintain balance. It's just inherently in our body's ability, right, to offload those stress hormones. And as our body stops working so hard to maintain balance, then as a result, it can more strongly support that optimal hormonal cascade that helps us get and stay pregnant.
I keep thinking about my rough sleep and how my cortisol probably spiked all night last night. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, mine is a little bit high today. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I'm not going to have any sugar today because I feel like sugar is going to spike it even more. Stick it to cheese and crackers.
Well, I want to know this next question. So, okay. This next question's one I want to know about. What are simple, realistic ways to support your body daily? I think we can all benefit from this.
Yeah, so spoiler alert here. When we optimize our health, we optimize our fertility, right? And I think that human beings really desire simple solutions to complex problems. And to be honest, if we're looking for Band-Aid solutions or that quick fix, this is likely, you're probably going to want to press forward a few times if you're listening. But my biggest piece of advice is to pick one thing at a time, nail it, and then stack another habit on top. Celebrate and stack those multiple small wins. Don't try to overhaul every aspect of your life because, let's face it, that will likely be way more stressful and likely not effective, right? Yeah, I think it's also a lie that it needs to be all or nothing, right? So each small change you make is one step forward to a healthier life and a more improved fertility. The habit stacking piece is actually one thing I love about our application. So during week 1, all the app will let you do is the 4-minute daily assessments. 4 minutes of relaxation, regulating your nervous system, upregulating your vagal tone. But it's not until after 1 week that your daily recommendations are unlocked. And then they build in time and intensity based on your body signals over time. We start with 2 weekly we call them mandatory activities. And then we have 3 optional ones. So you can kind of build up slowly. But for patients who opt to have a fertility nurse supporting them as well, we'll then look at the data and determine other lifestyle factors that we may be able to leverage to increase our fertility potential. So I think, ultimately when we try to do all the things, we inadvertently put ourselves backwards. So I think it's important to set ourselves up for success. And, pregnancy is rarely about one thing, right? It's about optimizing a lot of little things to make that gross probability enough to get you that second dark line. So if I were to pick some really high return on investment activities, they wouldn't be fancy, but they revolve around stress, sleep, and exercise. So I would say that sleep and exercise are probably the most underutilized tools to improve fertility, especially in how they optimize how our body manages stress and maintains homeostasis. So, we've talked about this before, but inflammation is likely the biggest contributor to rising infertility rates. Chronic stress and inflammation interfere with essential components of reproduction. And so the key message here is that to set your body up for a successful pregnancy, you must stop the incoming inflammation and create a healing environment for what's already smoldering on the inside. The single most important thing you can do for your hormonal and reproductive health isn't found in a supplement, but rather in how you structure your life. So when we leave that smoldering fire of inflammation unchecked and unmanaged, your body can actually reach a tipping point where it stops trusting you. Your brain misinterprets signals and things are just out of whack. So, the world we live in really has normalized constant stress. We've talked about, what constant stress can do to our bodies. So we need to deal with it. And remember, if we can't get rid of the stressor, we need to build resilience to it. Okay. We don't stress about being stressed. Okay. It's not your fault, but we can identify that it's real. And so, when it comes to how we address chronic stress, I think, first we measure it to become aware of the impact it's having on our physiology. We eliminate the stressors that are eliminatable, and then we make behavior changes to build our resilience to what we can't let go of. Our application uses science-based, evidence-backed exercise, which we'll talk about shortly, but we can also use strategies like screen-free downtime, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, acupuncture, journaling, parasympathetic activation, HRV breath work, right? And so sleep is probably the most underrated healing modality. The single most important thing you can do for your health is improve the quality of your sleep. Sleep is really pharmacy in its own right. Now, Sleep is when our body repairs, when it heals, recovers, pulses reproductive hormones, and also decreases inflammation. Sleep is when our body has the easiest time returning to baseline or homeostasis. It's insane to me, actually, that we don't talk about sleep hygiene more. But studies have shown that women with poor sleep have double the risk of infertility. And there was a study of IVF cycles where we looked at the duration of sleep. And for every hour of sleep a woman lost, she had 1.5 fewer eggs retrieved. So when we talk about,
oh my goodness,
nuts, right?
That's wild.
That's scary.
So when we think about sleep hygiene and making good sleep a priority, I would encourage you to aim for 7 to 9 hours, have a routine wind down ritual, be consistent with your bedtime and wake up times, get exposure to natural light within an hour of waking up, have a cool, dark room, stop eating 2 hours before bed. And the most important thing is stop using your screens for the last hour of the day. Ideally, not at all once it's dark outside. But this is a big one. Our screens are killing us. You know, we also reduce stress, decrease inflammation, and improve fertility with exercise and movement. So physical activity is important for more than just your overall health. We know that cardio and muscle building lowers inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, and decreases visceral fat, which is also inflammatory. Exercise also improves how your body manages stress by changing the hormone response and neurotransmitter release. Now, not all exercise is created equal, and that's what I love about OTO. The type, the duration, and the intensity is prescribed based on your body signals that day. So it takes the guesswork out of how you should exercise, for how long and when. For those who don't have access to a piece of technology like ours, the World Health Organization recommends a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate activity per week with at least 2 days of strength training. And for fertility purposes, I would encourage you to be careful not to over-exercise and under-fuel, as these are both stressors to your body and can contribute to that vicious cycle of inflammation. So, you know, we want to build resilience too and eliminate the stressors that we can. We want to focus on our sleep hygiene and strategically move our bodies. You know, every daily decision we make can impact our hormonal health for good and for bad.
That's really cool about the exercise piece and something to actually measure it for you, because I remember I would go in between over exercising, thinking it was good for fertility, to saying, okay, next month I'm not going to exercise. Maybe that's what I need to do, but it would be good to have something to measure to actually see how my body is reacting and what it needs.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting.
I agree. I love that you also said, and it's something you do better than I at, but I'm all about the all or nothing. Like
that is you.
I like the idea of just building small habits and like giving yourself a bit of grace that you don't have to be at
celebrate
100%.
the small wins.
Yeah.
Celebrate the small wins. I think that's so
really
important.
Well. Yeah.
I do try to do that because I think it's important, because I think if you're all or nothing, right? You're trying to get pregnant. It's not happening. So you just feel like you're back at square one again.
Yeah,
you know,
that was
if
me
you had something to measure your health, then you can see it's actually improving.
Yeah.
Your sleep's improving, everything's improving, and I like that.
Yeah.
It gives you more control.
Yeah, I think there's enough losses in the infertility space, right? Like, let's create wins. Yes. Let's create reasons to celebrate.
Yeah, that's so true. How do we talk about stress without making women feel like it's their fault? I feel like you've touched on this a little bit, which is
there's
nice.
Multiple pieces of good research that report women experiencing infertility have stress that is comparable to cancer patients and Navy SEALs in active duty.
I have heard this before.
It's real.
I have heard this before, and I feel like, wow, is this true?
Okay,
it is.
So I know I've said it already, but for those in the back, the stress you are feeling is real. Okay. And it's not okay to just say like, it's real. We got to do something about it, right? Our bodies weren't made to live in this world where the stress response of seeing that bear is chronically activated due to productivity and hustle culture, screens, work deadlines, trying to have a baby. You know, adding that struggle on top of things is just not fair. I've always said fertility patients are carrying around a backpack full of bricks, right? Filled with worries, anxieties, failed expectations. Some of those bricks have to be in the backpack, right? Think of those as the stressors that we know are coming. And we need to build more strength and more resilience to carrying the load of those mandatory bricks. But some of the bricks are actually movable. The weight doesn't have to be so heavy. So I think it's important to shed the load that isn't necessary, show kindness and compassion to ourselves, and then grow in resiliency to carry the rest. Remember, the more rooted and anchored we are, the less our body needs to fight to maintain stability in the storm. If it's not rocked so hard by stressors, it has the safety and the permission to optimize how it's allocating resources to having a baby. I think, what OTO is teaching me and all of my patients is not only that we measure stress, but we can take productive steps forward to lower the burden of it by building resilience.
You talked about the bricks in the bag, and I feel like, and you mentioned that not all of them have to be there. And I feel like on the journey, the biggest brick for most, and for me especially, was that it may never happen. Mm. And it's such a weighted fear. And then you add the blame of, it's my fault. Did I leave it too late? Have I done this wrong? Am I too stressed? And all of the mind goes wild. So I love that you're addressing the elephant in the room and that it isn't our fault. And we do live in a fast, crazy pace world where, we've got everything up against us. So we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fran, for joining us today. And we just had a quick look at our analytics. We now have over 100 countries, listeners wild. From 100 countries listening and potentially listening to this episode. So can everybody access Monday Fertility? And
so Monday Fertility is a virtual fertility space that we created so that couples, regardless of where they land on the fertility journey, can have access to this technology by OTO Fertility. So our OTO Fertility has partner clinics. And so the first place I would encourage the listeners to check out is otofertility.com. They may already be partnered with your clinic. And there are some progressive, innovative clinics across the world that are using the OTO biosensor as an intervention to help increase efficacy and increase success rates of IVF cycles. But if you're not yet partnered with a clinic, or you are with a clinic that is not currently using OTO as an intervention, then that is why we created Monday Fertility. So this is a virtual fertility space where, couples across the continuum, wherever they are in the world, can access this technology. But then they also have the opportunity or the option to have a fertility nurse kind of walk along the journey with them. So I meet with my patients once or twice a month. We really chew on the data. I'm like a little detective once in a while, trying to figure out which are the lifestyle factors that we could really leverage the most. This is really a lifestyle overhaul and optimization. And I think one of the coolest things that I see with my patients using OTO and joining us through Monday Fertility is that basically every patient will tell me that they start to feel better subjectively before their objective metrics change. And who doesn't want to feel more equipped to go through this journey? So it really is a lifestyle optimization. We know that stress is real and it might be hijacking your fertility. It might also be like making your life feel really crappy. Like, what can we do to make it better and to make it lighter? I hope that, whoever's listening, that you feel validated in the stress that is in your body and in your mind. And I really hope that you come away feeling like there are things in your control and that you can be an active participant in your care journey rather than a passive recipient of in-the-box protocols.
Oh,
Does
Right
everyone
now.
get a Fran on the
that's
journey?
what I wanted to ask.
Right now.
Does everyone get you?
No, we've got some amazing nurses on the
love
team, and they really
that's
set
cool,
the
that's
foundation
cool.
for me, and I get to come and be a part of it, and it's a gift for me.
Thank you so much, Fran, for joining us today. It was such great insights, and I just feel, I don't know, better.
Yeah, I feel heard, validated.
Yeah, I feel validated.
Yeah.
And I know the listeners will as well.
I agree.
I feel like you really get the journey, and that's all of your experience in the industry, working in the clinics, and now you're doing something a little bit different, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool. We'll add everything in the show notes too.
OTOfertility.com.
Yep, we'll link it all below.
Yep.
I think it's Fran's bedtime and it's our lunchtime. My stomach has been growling the whole time.
Oh, I'm sitting here next to Grumble Growls over here.
I hope the mic hasn't picked it up. But thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
thank you, Fran.
Fran go to bed now.
We'll see you.
See you next week, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
It was so good to meet you guys.
You
See you.
too.